Thank you, Ken. It's nice to see so many people out today. I'm Doug Kaplan, Tom's bigger brother, older brother, and bigger brother. I was hoping there'd be one of these podiums that was nice and big and solid so you wouldn't see my knee shaking. I'm not a good speaker and I'm not a good stander. And both my mom and wife told me not to mumble. So I'll do my best. You know, if the roles were reversed and Tom was eulogizing me, it would be like a roasting from Comedy Central. But since I'm not the comedian Tom is, this will be a brief reminiscence of some of the times I was privileged to spend with a very special person. Baby Tommy came home to Bob and Joyce when I was a year and a day old, so I don't really know what it was like to not have a little rugrat invading my kingdom. Some early events, according to my mom Joyce, are the bottle event. Mom was wondering why I was such a chubby, normal baby and Tom wasn't gaining much weight. Eventually, Mom had a plan. She would give us our bottles at nap time and spy through the open door. What she saw would horrify Dr. Spock. You guessed it, I, the elder, stronger, and much better nourished child, would guzzle my bottle with the gusto of a frat house flunky. I would then creep over to my starving little brother's bed and swap my empty bottle for his half-full one. Something like baby Stewie would do. You have to understand it was the 40s and you had to survive somehow. Other events from that era, using my bed as a trampoline, à la Cirque du Soleil. Until the then 3-year-old Tom ruined the fun by splitting his head open. Maybe that's why they call it a headboard. Come to think of it, Tom was always attracting accidents as a kid. If a rival group of kids threw a rock, it would find Tom's head like a heat-seeking missile. If some kid was skipping stones at a beach, the projectile would somehow find Tom's vivacious smile. If kids were swinging joyfully at a playground, Tom's head would spoil the merriment. If a frosty metal pole was beckoning on the way to Lord Wolseley's school, Tom's tongue would yield to temptation. After which, to add insult to injury, his teacher would parade him around in his blood-soaked parka to every classroom in the school. As an example of what not to do with a metal pole in January. Tom and I spent our summers with our grandparents and Aunt Jerry. First at the farm, and then in the metropolis of Limerick, Saskatchewan, population 300 and dropping fast. Now you must understand there wasn't an awful lot to do in Limerick in those days. One fuzzy TV channel, no video games, no iPods. I was amazed at how Tom could always keep himself occupied. He would actually collect bottle caps and invent baseball leagues. It would be teams like the Cokes, the Pepsis, the Blues, the Bohemians, and the Pilsners. He would have a little ball diamond with men/bottle caps in position. A marble would be rolled from the pitcher to a cap with a bat or popsicle stick, and the game would be on. He would keep meticulous statistics, batting averages, and standings. I'm convinced that this exercise prepared Tom for organizing future events like the Superstar Weekend, where he would use grown men instead of bottle caps for his pleasure. Seriously, Tom used to work his butt off for this annual sports weekend, and he once told me, "I know it's a lot of work, but I love to see all my friends together having fun." He also once said in his opening ceremony speech, "I'd like to thank my brother Doug for all his help. He buys the groceries, he collects the money, he provides his cabin. After that, for the rest of the weekend, he's pretty much useless." Anyway, back to Limerick. For some reason, Tom and I just loved going to Limerick. Sure, we had Grandma and Grandpa and Auntie Jerry and Uncle Ted, Auntie Joyce's family. But there was something else that would compel us to annually hitchhike the 500 miles if we didn't have a ride. Looking back, I think I've discovered the attraction: country girls. It's amazing how a striped shirt, high-water pants, white socks, and pointy black shoes could wow the gals at a dance. Being expert twisters, something the locals hadn't witnessed live as yet, didn't hurt either. Our dance cards were full. Tom was so popular, he once asked 6 or 7 girls on Main Street in Assiniboia to line up to take turns kissing him. There was no hesitation. The local boys were not impressed. Back in Winnipeg, Tom was going to Miles Mac High School, and he and Bill Kitson were driving teachers nuts. Like the time they were given detention slips for disrupting the class. Instead of showing up, they sent the following note: "Dear Mrs. Wenzel, due to circumstances beyond our control, we regret to inform you that we, Mr. Gregory Thomas Catholic, and Mr. William Kitson, are unable to accept your kind invitation to a 4 o'clock reception." I believe this led to further invitations, which were reluctantly accepted. Around this time, Tom was to meet the love of his life, the 15-year-old beauty, Susan Peters. Tom and I would often laugh at how some of us Catholics went to the far corners of the earth to find our spouses. Tom went from the 500 block of Linden, found Susan at the 400 block of Layton. I went from the 500 block of Linden to the 500 block of Kimberley to meet Pat. And Kim went from the 500 block of Linden, and she found Michael in the 500 block of Chelsea. Tom and Susan and Pat and I had many great times together, going to movies, concerts, and camping. One of our favorite stunts would be on the way back from a washroom break at night on a dark trail. Either Tom or I would discreetly lob a stone into the bush, yell, "Skunk!" and take off running. Amidst all the panic and screaming, Susan would usually sprint right past us like Donovan Bailey. Tom always had an incredible gift for writing witty and humorous speeches and presentations. One year at Miles Mac, I remember he was the campaign manager for a student that was running for school president. And each candidate and campaign manager had to address the student body of about 1,200 students. Well, Tom stole the show. He had the students and staff in hysterics. But the next week, students would come up to me asking, "Why isn't your brother running for school president?" I would just smile and think inwardly, not a good idea. This was the funny part of Tom. Tom also had a very deep, sincere, moral side. From the time he was a little boy, it was often said that he would make a fine minister. His concern for all, his generosity and his faith and positive attitude were an inspiration for many. You get to know someone very well when you share a bedroom from birth to adulthood. And I knew Tom very well. Countless nights trying to fall asleep were spent talking about a litany of subjects, from girls to God to our next trip to Saskatchewan or to Camp Shiloh. Tom would seldom speak negatively of anyone and was always very honest and positive. Mom tells the story of Tom and a friend throwing a baseball around at Neil Campbell's school. Tom's friend threw the ball through the school window and the boys quickly departed for home. That night, Tom wrote a note to the principal saying that he was responsible for the damage and would pay the bill. His sister Kim was given the note to deliver. The principal was flabbergasted and said he seldom observed such honesty from a student. When Tom and Susan bought their little cabin with Jeff and Judy at Lester Beach, one of Tom's rules was that any family member could have the cabin for holidays, and everyone was welcome on Sundays. I took it a bit further and set up my camper in his front yard for 2 years. Tom was a fantastic father and uncle and would organize fun things for all the kids. Hikes on the Grizzly Adams Trail, evening swims followed by popcorn, and goofy campfire songs were Uncle Tom's specialties. He made kids feel special, especially his nephew Colin, who loves his Uncle Tom very much. Colin wanted me to share a story about him and Uncle Tom. Because we have satellite television at home, Colin watched the Daily Jeopardy show at home, and then went to one of the many suppers that Auntie Susan invited him to. Much to Colin's delight, Tom was watching the same show when he got there. Colin proceeded to bet Uncle Tom that he would know more answers than him. Tom was astounded at Colin's sudden brilliance, but refused to pay up when Colin confessed the truth. Tom would often refer to me as his best friend. And although being Tom's best friend would be an honor and a privilege, I was his big brother. That was just my job. I tip my hat to his real best friends for their love and faithfulness. Barry Bush, Rick Kazecki, Terry Wall, Neil McJanet, Ken Taylor. You guys are the real deal. Also, Kim Stooner was often mentioned as his favorite co-worker. In closing, I would like to say, Tommy, I hope you're enjoying that Heavenly Horseshoe tournament with Grandpa Bob, Grandpa Frank, Grandpa Alec, Uncle Tommy, Uncle Angus, Uncle Murdoch, Chuck, Jeff, Russ, Billy and Gordon, the cheerleaders, Grandma Violet, Grandma Felicia, and Elsie. And P.S. I hope Uncle Ted isn't teasing you too much. I love you, brother. Keep that crib board ready. Thank you.